Our first tech event, the Future is Female Women Innovators in Law and Technology. My name is Lauren Hudson, and I'm a legal innovator at A2J Tech and a third-year law student at the University of Denver Stern College of Law. Today's event will be a conversation between me and Camila Lopez and Leila Banijamali, and there will be a 10-minute Q&A session at the end of the hour. So like Laura said, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat or DM her or I or Lacey, and we will be sure to get those questions answered for you. And so without further ado, I will introduce our wonderful speakers. So Camila Lopez is the co-founder and CEO of People Clerk, a business that empowers self-represented litigants to exercise their rights, alleviates bureaucratic struggles, and helps individuals navigate the complex court system in an easy to understand and affordable way. Camila has a passion for out-of-court dispute resolution and is also a certified mediator. Prior to People Clerk, she worked in a plaintiff's mass tort litigation and for the Bureau of Consumer Frauds and Protection at the Office of the New York State Attorney General. Thank you for being here today, Camila. Next, we have Leila Banijamali, who is the co-founder of CEO and the CEO of Symbium Corp, a comp law company, which she launched in 2019 with her Stanford co-founders. Symbium is a company which fundamentally is disrupting the complex planning and zoning regulation industry through intuitive web applications, which help people discover what's possible on a certain piece of property. So prior to launching Symbium, Leila founded businesses in the technology, media industries, in addition to acting outside as general counsel to hundreds of tech companies. So thanks for being here today as well.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we will go ahead and get started with the questions. We'll start with you, Leila. We're curious to know, what are some of the biggest barriers to access to justice that you've seen when it comes to property and zoning law?
That's a great question. So with regards to zoning law, I think the biggest barrier, barriers, I would say two. First include, understanding what the zoning regulations mean, for example, for my particular property, right? And second, what a change in the zoning regulations may mean for an entire community, for a city, for a state, because the public has a very difficult time navigating zoning regulations, period. And by the public, I mean homeowners, contractors, housing advocates, developers, even city planning staff. So, navigating the regulations is very challenging, given that they're often maintained in multiple different buckets, different places. And so they're very hard to find, but also they're updated regularly. So, it's very difficult to know what's the most current version of the law. And then there's no uniformity to how they're written. So learning what's possible in a new city or town is akin to learning a new language.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. Sorry about that. I was having trouble unmuting. We will move to you, Camila, and ask the first question here. So part of your mission at People Clerk is to highlight the struggles of self-represented litigants when interacting with courts and government agencies. And it's very clear that systemic change can occur so that the self-represented litigant can have a chance to kind of obtain that equal opportunity to exercise their rights. Can you please talk about some of those barriers that you have seen in terms of access to justice in your work? And then, why do those barriers exist in the first place? Kind of a similar question, but different industry or different sector as Leila.
I would say there's three. So time, money, and language barriers. So people don't have a lot of time to figure out how to access the court system, how to access their legal rights, what to do when they have a small claims court issue. If they don't speak English as their first language, or even if they do, we all know that the legal system loves to use legalese. So it's very, very hard to understand. I mean, I think lawyers, we take it for granted, plaintiff, defendants. I think I posted one time on my Twitter feed, I saw an order where the judge wrote a triangle, and I was just completely just like blown away that a judge would do this in small claims court. This was a small claims court order. So even if English is your first language, it's still a barrier to accessing your legal rights. So I said time, language, and then money. If you cannot afford an attorney, you're stuck doing this on your own. So you have to, be able to have enough time to figure out how all this works. So you're basically left out and you can't assert your legal rights.
Sorry, more trouble unmuting. I need to get the button figured out. Thank you for that answer. And like those three factors definitely make a lot of sense in terms of self-represented litigants. So Leila, back to you. I know that you also, sorry, 1 second. You, before founding Symbium in 2018, you founded businesses in the, sorry, is the noise bad with my ringing of the earbuds?
It's okay now, it's better.
Okay. Difficulties. So, but before founding, is this better?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. Before founding Symbium in 2018, you founded businesses in the technology media industry and served as general counsel for technology companies. So how did these experiences influence your decision to found Symbium, and how do they inform your work today?
Yeah, great question, Lauren. And by the way, you don't need to mute yourself. We don't hear any background noise, so you're
Okay.
good. It'll save you some stress. So basically, like that's a great question. The work is actually very different. The work itself is very different because as a practicing lawyer, I was interfacing directly with mostly small business owners. And whereas in my technology company, thousands of business owners or homeowners or general members of the public are interfacing with Symbium.com at any given moment. And so that's really, really cool. Very, very a different kind of work. But the goal is very aligned, and that is that Symbium helps anyone to understand and visualize what's built and what's possible on any California property.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense how that would inform that work. Thank you for your answer. So back to you, Camila. You have served as a certified mediator in the past for California small claims courts. And I'm wondering how your experiences as an alternative dispute resolution mediator has impacted your work today, and what role do you see that moving forward in the access to justice gap situation?
So I think we first have to start with the fact that most self-represented litigants don't know what ADR is or ODR is. So there's a huge knowledge gap. And bridging that knowledge gap is going to be hard. Once we bridge that knowledge gap and figure out how to explain to a self-represented litigant what mediation is, what arbitration is, what ODR is, I think we can make a lot of progress. With People Clerk, we do a lot of content. There's a lot of free mediation resources in California and in other states. So my goal is to be able to explain to the litigant what mediation is, what online dispute resolution is, before they start interacting with the court. With that, and I also need to explain the benefits. A lot of people think that the word settle means they might be getting something less than what they want to get. They don't realize that settlement doesn't necessarily mean getting less than what you may be suing for. So it's bridging the knowledge gap, and that's how we're going to make strides with alternative dispute resolution. I have high hopes. I would love to integrate more ADR as part of the People Clerk software. We're not there yet, but for now, we'll bridge the knowledge gap.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know that here where I'm based in Colorado, ODR, as they call it here, kind of plays a really big role in also that access to justice gap, and I've done a
Yeah.
lot of work on that, so it's cool.
Yeah.
So I have a question next for both of you. Either one can answer. No one can answer. whatever we're feeling, and we can move on to the next question too. But the question is, our society teaches us that failure is kind of this big fear, and to kind of avoid it at all costs. But in actuality, it's very necessary and can be a transformative experience. I'm wondering, what is your biggest failure, which I know is a loaded question, and what lesson or lessons have you learned from it?
That's a great question. Camila, you want to go first or should I go? I have so many failures.
Me too. You go first. I want to hear yours first.
So, so one thing, I have thought about it a lot in the past, definitely has formed who I am today. I used to play competitive tennis, and in a draw of, let's say, 80 athletes, or sometimes even more, over 100 athletes, only one is a winner at the end of the day. There's only one winner. And so you have 79 losers every single week. And these are weekly tournaments. You have to go to a different city to play each one. So I had to bounce back and believe that I would win in the next tournament, every single week. And so it taught me a lot about resilience. I'll say, as a business owner, I think that some failures, they happen in maybe smaller segments more regularly. And it's important. What I've learned is to say no to distractions, features that pull us away from our current goals, or, which actually that mistake can be very expensive, because as a startup, you have a very limited runway and you want to make the most of it and prove a certain thing by a certain date. And also, along the same lines, partners that aren't the right fit, that may be easy doors that are open, but may take you down the wrong path. So I think both of these are generally distractions, and it's taught me that it can be very expensive to do that. And just, the lesson is just to learn how to say no, and to say it confidently, and just decide on a path and to follow it.
Wow, I played high school tennis, and I think I lost almost every other match. So I definitely know where you're coming from, to some extent. My failure would definitely be, I'm still a perfectionist, but I was trying to always be a perfectionist. When we started People Clerk, I wanted to have a perfect product. It was really hard for me to wrap my head around an MVP, a minimally viable product. I didn't even know what an MVP was when I started People Clerk, but that's a different story. And this constant fear that clients are going to be upset was holding us back. With a startup, you have to learn how to fail fast. And that perfectionism wasn't allowing us move the business forward, trying new things very fast, iterating very, very fast. And therefore we weren't learning that certain things weren't working fast. So letting go of that, I haven't completely let it go, but I'm still working on it. And it's extremely important. If not, we won't get anywhere.
Yeah, well, those are both great answers. So thank you for taking the time to think about that. I know it's not an easy thing to always think about. So it's really cool to hear from you guys. In that vein, I'm going to do another group question and switch to kind of your experience about being a woman in the industry, in the legal tech industry, and what has been perhaps the most challenging aspect of that. And then maybe alternatively, what has given you an edge, maybe that being a woman has allowed you to see or experience.
Why don't you go first, Camila? I'll let you take this one first.
So I have this constant fear that I'm being underestimated, whether because I'm a woman, Latina, young. So I have this constant fear, but I have to always, I think that's also my superpower. I think people don't realize, so maybe they are actually underestimating me and they don't realize what's coming. So that's my secret weapon. They have this, this girl bubbly personality, but they don't realize I'm in it to win it and to grow and become the dominant player in the legal tech field in 10 years. So it's really our superpower. Let them keep underestimating us because they don't know what's coming.
Yeah, I think, I just feel like, challenging so far has been, I would have to say, a lot of the issues around equity, and I feel like I'm not a great person to ask this question because I always worked for myself. So I didn't have colleagues to turn to and, do a comparison of let's say, my fees as an attorney. But, what I did learn is anytime I had a bad feeling about something, whether it was, I don't know, is it because I was a woman or something else? I don't know. But just that perspective, and that it's important to, fail fast and move on, or just to move on and pursue something else, and to just not get, downtrodden, to conduct, what we do at our company is these retrospectives after product launches to kind of look back and see, okay, what happened, what went wrong, what went right, what can we do to improve next time? Camila's taking notes. I don't know.
Yeah, that's really
Am I in
good.
trouble?
Retrospective. I'm
Okay,
gonna start doing those.
Yeah, so, and there's apps for that too, that help with note taking on that. But anyways, the point is, I think just, what did I gain? Just perspective and probably some business acuity and, maturity, and to really, I think as I get a little older, just understanding what's really important, and, not letting outside voices impact those beliefs as much.
Yeah, well, thank you both for your perspectives on that question. I feel like you both had really salient points in your answers, so it's great to hear. Moving to the individual questions again for just a couple rounds. Leila, you've mentioned that one of the keys to Symbium's success is the comp law software, which translates those complex laws and regulations into computer code. I was wondering if you could just elaborate a bit on that technology and how it works, how it's developed, and yeah.
Sure, happy to. So, how it works is basically we have a system that allows us to take laws and regulations, and there's some manual process involved, there's some not manual process involved, and we transform them into these very, very beautiful, intuitive web applications. We have a technology that's proprietary to us that helps us do this very quickly and in a very lightweight manner. That is important when laws and regulations change over time, that the system can be maintained very quickly and updated very quickly. Probably the most famous incarnation that I can think of right on the spot of computational law is TurboTax, which helps, the tax-paying public, those people that pay taxes, of course, instantly understand their tax obligations based on their particular situations. And that's the essence of computational law, is to mechanize laws and regulations so that people interact with them in a different way, not flipping through textbooks and reading about them online and then having to synthesize and analyze them against, a personal experience, but instead having a beautiful, intuitive, visual web application that you can interact with that will tell you what you can and can't do in advance, so that you can perform hypotheticals and make a decision later on, not have to make the mistake and then have to pay the price because you applied the laws incorrectly, or whatever the case may be. So I feel like that's probably the best sort of description I can make of the utility of computational law and an example of it.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I feel like whenever you mention TurboTax, everyone's like, oh yeah, I know that one. And so kind of relatedly to that, how many iterations did it take for you to be successful with your product? Or is it you're always in that iteration phase? Is that the better question?
So still trying, I think.
Yeah.
I'm still iterating. And I think, success is defined obviously very differently depending on who you ask. but I believe we're just on the edge of some really incredible work and at the edge of the highest and best use, both volumetrically and impactfully, which is all yet to come. But it's really, for Symbium, it's just around the corner, which we're super excited about.
Awesome. Thank you for your answers there. So Camila, I'll turn to you and talk a bit about your process, your 5-step process. So People Clerk follows this 5-step process for lawsuits, and that's preparing, filing, serving, then preparing for the actual hearing, and then most importantly, you've mentioned keeping the individual actually updated on each step of the lawsuit in that process. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit about that, how you came to figure out that that was the step, the iteration of your product that you wanted, and then kind of also relatedly, I can ask this again later though, what is your user testing process like?
Yeah, it's never ending. I don't think we're ever going to think it's perfect. It's, you know, it's really hard, and we're constantly working on it. But how I see in the short term success is, can someone with a 3rd or 4th grade reading level that doesn't know English, if they can use People Clerk, I've reached success in the short term. Accessibility is a huge factor for me in measuring that. So it's, and how do I measure it? It's if we keep doing user testing and we understand, we see that people are going through the entire process on their own. One of the main steps is users have to upload all their evidence. So they have to be able to prove to the judge why they should win. And People Clerk helps them gather all their evidence and put it together into a judge-friendly evidence packet. So they have text messages, they have pictures, they have contracts, they have receipts, they have videos, audio files. How do we make a technology product as low tech as possible so anyone, my grandma, anyone included, can be able to upload all their documents and use the software, interact with the software to create an organized evidence packet for the hearing? We have not achieved that yet. If I had, I would be able to tell you how to do that, but I'm still figuring it out, and it's going to take some time.
Yeah, and so in that vein, I'm wondering how do you gather people for user testing, and then what is that process like when you're trying to figure out what the product needs to, how it needs to evolve?
Yeah. So it depends what type of feature we're testing. But if we're testing our upload evidence feature, everyone who's uploading evidence is a current client. So when we get clients chatting us, they tell us, hey, how do I upload today I had one, for example, someone sent a message on our chat and said, how do I upload a text message? So I was very curious. I was like, I have articles on this. I have a lot of content, how to do this exactly. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get on the phone and call them. And I called the client and I was like, hi, can you walk me through your process of how you're thinking about uploading your text message? For me, it was so simple. I was like, you take a screenshot, you upload that screenshot from your phone to the People Clerk portal straight from your phone. But what I realized in this conversation with one of our clients was it's not as easy as I thought. The missing link was that he didn't know he could log on to People Clerk with his phone. I was taking it for granted that the majority of our users log on to their People Clerk portal on their phone. But I guess it wasn't, we could have made it more obvious that it's user friendly on both your computer and your phone, because he had all the text messages on his phone. So I think sometimes people are really scared to talk to their users, but there's 2 rules: talk to users, build products, and you can never forget that.
Yeah, that's really, thank you for sharing that story. That's really important to remember that, I think, in these processes.
Yeah.
Okay, moving to you, Leila, back to you. So you have talked about the rising popularity of ADUs, or accessory dwelling units, in California, and kind of how that has accelerated some of Symbium's success. So I was wondering if you could touch on that, and then just explain that, an overview for like the people in the audience, and then why they're important as well.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So ADUs, Lauren, are basically just second units. That's just a different name for that. It's the accessory dwelling units. Some people call them granny flats. And California allows up to 2 ADUs or an ADU and a junior ADU on certain types of properties with some minimal requirements. And they're basically fast-track forms of housing that may be relatively inexpensive, but like anything else in construction, they can also be costly. And the goal of the state of California has been to use ADUs as a path to increase more affordable housing in the state. When we identified this regulation coming into effect that would basically allow homeowners to build these ADUs as of right on their properties, and as of right get the approvals to build those in a fast track manner, meaning, in 60 days or less, we realized that there was an opportunity here in this new space that was going to be very popular to come in and basically build a web application to serve the public for it. So we took the initiative and built what we called at the time Symbium Build. And that is a portal that allows anyone to understand whether an ADU is allowed on any property in California, what the development standards are. So in other words, how big it can be, how high it can be, how far does it need to be back from the setbacks, and then connect with ADU developers who can build an ADU for you. And the coolest part is you can actually visualize the ADU right on your parcel. You can move it around, and based on the color that it turns, you'll know whether it's allowed in that particular location or not, or whether it's allowed to be that particular size, or if it needs to be farther away from other buildings. And so, and then of course, next steps to get one built. And this kind of led into the much larger play, which is Symbium.com, that is the property information portal that acts as a framework for all of this, these types of experiences, on top of which the ADU tool is but one app. So that's build, and it's been pretty exciting because, like I said, at the time, no one really owned the space, and we kind of came in and we said, okay, if we build this thing, we have coverage across the state. What might that look like, from a usage perspective? And realized that every month the usage just was increasing, and albeit slowly, but it was certainly a demand, and just the feedback from the public on how this is a far superior interaction with the regulations than what they were experiencing previously just said it all.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I encourage everyone to go to Symbium.com and check out the technologies that it has in creating these visual maps of the ADUs and all the properties. It's really awesome. Really, really cool. So Camila, moving to you, back to the court system issues. So I'm wondering what your process is in working with the California state court system and other governmental entities with People Clerk, and what advice you have for potentially other legal aid organizations or startups that are also working closely with the government.
It's really hard. It's really, really hard. It's frustrating. Things are backwards. It's not just California, it's other states. Forms that say they're mandatory to use are actually not. So I mean, if it's hard for us, imagine what it's like for a self-represented litigant trying to access their legal rights. And this is what drives me. My pinned tweet is breaking through court and government barriers so I can teach others how to do it themselves. And I feel extremely strongly about that because I see it every day, how self-represented litigants are treated differently than they would treat an attorney. And yeah, sometimes I do pull I'm an attorney card because that's sometimes how I can get more information on behalf of our users. And it sucks. It sucks that I have to do that. But you have to do what it takes. Sometimes it involves escalating the issue very high up, but this is what I live for. So it makes the job fun.
Yeah, thank you for your response there. So I have another question for both of you to answer. And whoever wants to jump in first can definitely do that. This question is in regards to entrepreneurship. So I'm wondering what has surprised you about being an entrepreneur, and have you always had a desire to be one?
Oh, you go first. You go first.
That's it. Yes. No, I'll let you go ahead, Camila. I'll go after you.
Most surprising is I had always seen, it's a roller coaster, and I love to talk about this because you don't really know what the roller coaster is like until you're doing it. It's a roller coaster of emotions. Some days you're doing an amazing panel with co-panelists and a great host. Other days you're at the bottom of the roller coaster. You're like, is this gonna work? What am I doing? Like, what's going on? And it's just being perseverant during those times. Did I always want to be an entrepreneur? Maybe, yeah. I think I told my mom once I never wanted to have a boss, and now she laughs at me. She's like, you were so right. Like, you never wanted a boss, and look at you now. But you always have a boss. My clients are my boss right now, so that's not true. Don't do it to be your own boss, because you will never be your own boss. But yeah.
Yeah, that's I think I agree with that, that there's always going to be someone who's the boss of you. So I think, what surprises me about being an entrepreneur, I think that a lot of entrepreneurs, so what surprises me is actually other entrepreneurs and the decisions that they make, foregoing, and I'll get to what surprises me about my own decisions. But how many entrepreneurs forego any type of like market research because they're so really embedded in their ideas that this has got to win no matter what. And there's zero customers and they still are convinced that it's got to win, or even worse, when foregoing the user testing when launching a new product. It doesn't matter how cool you think this is or how big the market is, but if you don't do any user testing, you can't, point to one user who can say, yes, this has solved my needs. If you don't even have just one, then that's a big problem. So there's actually some really good articles from Harvard Business Review. They've written about this issue, and I think they're really worth reading. I wish I had them off the top of my head, but I think a simple search would help people find them. And then the second thing, like with regards to myself, is just anticipating what it would be like to work with other people, and especially new hires. Like, how do you know who's a good fit for the company and who's a good fit for other people that work in the company? That's a big challenge. How do we sort of determine that? And we have to kind of create these environments of testing where we're trying to recreate the kinds of work that you would be doing at Symbium in a shorter period of time. And that can be quite challenging. So I feel like that's an area that, has really surprised me how challenging that is as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, those are really, really interesting answers. Leila, I'm curious now, you mentioned something in your answer about doing no market research and just jumping in because some entrepreneurs are so confident in their idea. And that, relatedly to that, do you have any advice about, without going maybe too far into like the actual research of it, but about how to identify a successful idea in its infancy stages?
I think so. Yeah. So, I think everyone, when they have their idea, usually people know at least one thing, and that is, who would your users be? You're solving someone's problem, so you at least know who your users would be. And so what I would suggest is, even before people take the trouble and the time and the cost to build something in code, just to sketch it on a piece of paper, and, like the girls from Rent the Runway did when they were at Harvard, and just, put it in front of a group that's just standing around and, say, hey, if this, for example, dress was online right now, would you be willing to rent it? No. What about this dress? What about this dress? What, and you kind of keep flipping through it. And that's all user testing is, and okay, now we got through that. Would you pay $5? What about $50? And would you want it for a week? What about 3 days? And so you kind of just go through this rabbit hole of finding the limits and trying to understand what people are comfortable with. And if you do that enough times, and I don't mean you need to do it 100 times, but if you do that enough times with quality feedback, you may have enough information to create some assumptions, maybe 4 or 5 assumptions that you write down on a piece of paper and you put it up on the wall in front of you and you look at them every day. And when you realize that your assumptions are wrong, you take it off and you put a new one on. So I think that's something that is very low cost and anyone can do. And you'd be surprised how many people don't do those kinds of simple things.
Yeah, that is super helpful. And Camilla, feel free to jump in on that secondary question as well, if you have anything.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with everything Leila said. And if you don't know how to do a user interview, Y Combinator has some YouTube videos on how to do user testing. That's how I learned. So, and my co-founder was also really good at user testing. He was a product manager prior to starting People Clerk, but YouTube Startup School from Y Combinator, that will help.
This is like, I just want to add one thing, and this is, it's a really big question. I think it's super important. And this is kind of like, I feel like we're getting to like this exciting point in our talk, and maybe we should edit it and put this at the very front. But, I feel like, user testing is just such a big and important topic. I went to the meetup offices in, I think it was 2013, maybe. And the founder was kind of walking us through how they do their user testing. And you wouldn't believe it. I mean, it was really ingenious. And this was a company that was already established at that time. They had basically set up like this sort of taped together, cheap video camera tied to a tripod that was looking down at a laptop. And all they would do is schedule people to come in and use meetup.com, and they would just record it and view people, doing it, and basically just have that person, the user tester, talk out loud as they were testing. And this whole rig was something like under $50. So it was really great. I mean, you really hardly need anything. And there's services out there, usertesting.com, I believe, and other ones. But yeah, I think it's super important is user testing, and it doesn't mean you have to be in tech, but you can do it in offline as well.
I think user testing also helped convince me that how severe the problem actually was with small claims. My background as an attorney, at first, I was taking it for granted. I was like, how hard can this be? Like, all these people keep calling me, yeah, but how hard really can this be? And I realized the magnitude of the problem when we started doing user testing. And that was the first thing we did before we did anything. We were like, are people really having this issue? And we just put all of our questions in an Excel and went question by question, just interviewing as many people as we could.
Yeah, those are both really interesting and helpful techniques to keep in mind when doing that user testing process. Kind of jumping off of the founding process of a business or being an entrepreneur, that topic, how did you both approach finding technical co-founders, or are you the technical co-founder? Kind of walk us through that process, and is that necessary to find right away?
I mean, I lived with mine, so I cheated. Without that, I had it really easy. But everyone always asks me this, and I never know what to tell them. It's finding someone you trust and can go on this roller coaster with you is hard. So I couldn't have thought of anyone better than my co-founder and husband to do this with.
You married your co-founder. Oh my goodness.
We were married beforehand. I don't know if I would have married him after we started this crazy.
That's very exciting. All right. So, I agree with what Camila said, that, it really is like a marriage. I mean, you're so close and you have so many struggles together, and there's lots of ups and downs, but the whole point of it is to problem solve together. And it's got to be someone that you trust, that you can implicitly trust by your side to problem solve with you. and to think, put the company first really all the time, that the company must win, right? And so, I met my technical co-founder at Stanford. We were both there. I was doing a fellowship there, and he was finishing his PhD. And his advisor became our third co-founder, who's still a professor there at Stanford in the computer science department. So, I recommend going to events, just places where you would enjoy to be, in environments where you would sincerely enjoy to be. It could be hackathons, it could be other types of live events. There's virtual events now, but I think live is way better, and certainly they're opening up. So I think just going to different events and just talking to people, just saying hello, and asking a lot of questions and meeting as many people as possible. I think people just want to meet other people. And so I think the best thing to do for yourself is just to kind of like open up and say hi, and you'll be surprised with the response that you get.
To jump off that point, a good place might be Y Combinator Startup School. It's free. So if you are looking for a technical co-founder, they have a co-founder matching tool, but it's a great place to like network online and build the fundamental skill sets you need to launch a startup. As someone who wasn't from the tech world, it really, really helped me doing that when we first started People Clerk, and we did several batches of it. And people were always talking about how they were meeting a lot of technical co-founders or looking for one.
Cool. Those are both really helpful pieces of advice for that aspect of entrepreneurship and finding that technical co-founder. My next question, because it seems to be going well to do the dual question and then having you both answer, I feel like the energy is better that way, so we're going to keep it.
I agree.
Yeah, just for these last few minutes until the Q&A. So this next question is, how do you validate, or how did you validate your product before raising any capital or even forming a team?
So for me, it was really easy. It was just basically with conversations and simple sketches, like I said, simple user interfaces that didn't look nice, that didn't work well, that weren't intuitive. We didn't try and make them look pretty on purpose. We just wanted to know if it was functional and people knew what to click on or look at, and that just stuff that we were eager to get in front of people. And validating, our idea was also about how we talked about it, which is sort of more of like a marketing or a PR portion of it, because it's not just about the thing, it's also about how you present it, and learning how to talk about it and not say things and pause and let the other person react. And so those were really, super insightful.
I'll pass on this one. We'll go to the next one. We'll go on, because I do see there is a question in the comments. Or we're going to leave it to later?
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and start the Q&A now, because
Okay.
we've actually got a lot of questions rolling in. We want to give them ample time. So the first question that we received looks like it is for Leila. So you've mentioned that getting the wrong investors or people involved in the company were distractions. What is your process in making sure that you are surrounding yourself with the right people?
Yeah, so there's no 100% guarantee that you'll be able to hit this mark every time. But I've developed a process that I feel like works well for me, and it has to do with how we interview people, the kinds of preliminary questions we ask. We're really trying to understand not so much the content of what people say, but how they think, what they're passionate about. It's not enough to say, if I want to work at Symbium because, it seems interesting and I'm looking for a different kind of job, but you really have to indicate that you're feeling the pain, oh, here, I'm giving away all the secrets now. Now everyone's going to say that they're pain. But basically, that's one of the things. And then we have a technical interview where a number of us are in the room. Not me, actually. It's more technical developers and product folks. And there we have specific exercises that we really thought about very well, and we've honed over the couple years that we've been in business, and tried to really kind of get to the heart of like, how does this person think about our work, and how would they think about the kinds of problems that we face every day, and just having them talk out loud about it and kind of ushering them through that hard problem. And I would say when that person signs on, there's typically sort of like a period where we're still trying to determine whether it's the right fit, and this happens at companies all the time. There's sort of like a period of time where we're evaluating each other, and we make that a very open process. We have that conversation at different intervals within the first couple months. And if it doesn't work, my advice is, more importantly, what's your plan when it doesn't work? And that is to stop the bus and offboard them as quickly as possible, and to make it, just very as amicable as possible. It's always painful, but that's what my advice would be. It's not anyone's fault. Sometimes it's just not the right fit. So, to the extent possible, just try and help that person move on as well.
So feel the pain. I remember the secret. So everyone else remember it too. So this one's for both of you. Someone said, would love to hear your thoughts on funding just in general in the legal tech space. And then as a set of questions, they say, how did their companies personally get funded? And then how do you find investors?
I think one of the hardest questions is market sizing. So make sure you are very prepared to answer that question. In terms of how we found investors, warm introductions. It's a world that lives by the warm introduction. That said, I wanted to break this barrier and test it out and see if I cold emailed some investors. And one of my favorite investors, I could have gotten a warm intro to them, but they put on their website that they, accepted cold intro. So I'm like, I'm going to test this out, and it worked. But I would not test that out. I would just go for the warm introductions. That's the easiest way. And meeting other founders give the best warm intros, and especially if it's an investor that invested in them. So build your network of founders, and when the time comes, ask them to help you get warm introductions.
Can you repeat that first question, Lauren?
Yeah, so the first part of the question was super broad. It was just talking about funding in general. And then the sub questions dealt with how did their companies get funded, and then how did they find investors to fund?
Yeah, I agree with Camila. I mean, I think that the best way is to get warm introductions, because investors receive emails, so many emails every day, and it really just goes to the bottom of the pile. And I think that a lot of them, may not even get read or taken seriously. But when you have a warm introduction, I think that really makes all the difference in the world. And, if you think, okay, I don't know any investors, I don't have any warm introductions, so you need to get out there and go to some events and meet investors. There are events all the time in so many places, and there's no excuse not to know any investors. They're just everywhere. So, I think trying to go to events, and, if you can't, if you're in a city where there's not as many, maybe make a trip to somewhere where there's events regularly. It's worth it. I mean, if you're really serious about your company, there's some events that are, annual events that are just massive, and, hordes of investors and other entrepreneurs go there, and, it's a great way to connect with people. But yeah, that's, I think how we got our funding was my prior relationships with investors. I always say it's one of the primary roles of the CEO to keep the company capitalized. And so in that capacity, you have to have relationships. I mean, by definition, you really have to have those relationships either already established or be willing to do the hard work of establishing them in a very short period of time. So that's, my advice.
And in the justice tech space, quick plug for the Justice Technology Association. That's where you can meet some really great founders in the B2C legal tech space.
Cool. Maybe it might be helpful to drop that in the chat, or just so people remember that, because that's really important too. So thanks for those answers there. The next question deals with, as a woman, how difficult was it to negotiate with investors? Do you feel like that had an impact on your negotiations, or just kind of talking about that experience?
I did not feel that personally. So if it adversely impacted how much I raised or on what terms, I feel like I was blind to that. So maybe it's better that I don't know. But I felt like I was very clear, and I felt like I was in command in the room. I really felt like I was very, very supported by my co-founders in those talks. And I felt that I had an extraordinary amount of, I don't know if optimism is the right word, but confidence, I suppose, is the best word, that I was, ready to raise, and part of that is just practice. I mean, if you're going into a room and you're humming and hawing, and it means you haven't practiced enough. That's all. It's as simple as that. So, I tell my team, I take an iPhone and I put it on the desk in front of me, and I record myself in whatever presentation I'm giving to make sure that I'm clear, I'm coherent, I know what I'm talking about, I'm using my hands correctly, I'm saying all the right things in the right way. And I go back and I view it, and I do this over and over and over again until I'm happy with the version that with the last version that I recorded. So I think things like that make a big difference. And in that respect, I wasn't thinking in that moment, oh gosh, I'm a woman and what's this going to mean for me and all that stuff. It was totally far away from my mind.
I think about it all the time. I think about, is someone judging me like based on because I'm a woman, because I'm young? That's what I mentioned before. It's constantly playing in my head. But if I have a doubt about an investor, I pass on them. You're the one with that they want to give the money to. They didn't think about the idea. They're not hustling every day. So if you have a fear that an investor, if you have any doubts at all about them, pass, run far away. That's not a good sign. Your gut is usually right. All investors talk, but so do founders. So have a good founder network and do your research.
Yeah, those are both really interesting and helpful perspectives. So thank you for speaking on that. Next question is, how did you get your developers? Hire, outsource? If outsource, did you outsource from your country or other countries?
Do you want to answer first, Camila, or should I go ahead?
You can go.
So our initial developer was my co-founder Abhijit, actually, for a long period of time, the only developer. So he had a lot on his shoulders, and then we started to slowly hire more from there. But for outsourcing, we did that too. And you just I think that the fear with outsourcing, which is what's clear in this question, is this idea of idea grabbing. I have felt less concerned about that, because we're very careful about what kind of work we outsource. It doesn't mean that you have to give your best and your most sensitive work to organization that's a consulting one, regardless of if they're overseas or if they're onshore. It doesn't matter. But I feel like with outsourcing, it's really important to make sure that you are drawing lines around what you want them to work on. Because at the end of the day, the most important stuff, I think, it's helpful to be done in-house if you can help it. Outsourcing can get quite expensive pretty quickly, by the way.
So yeah, we did not outsource our team. We did start with contractors that would work hand in hand with Gustavo, who's the CTO of People Clerk, our first and only developer for some time too. But it's important. You're building a technology company. You need to do it yourself. That's the work. That's the software you're building. But it's hard. It's fine. It's hard finding really good talent, especially when you're a startup and you don't have a lot of money to work with.
Those are both great points. So we are about at 1 minute left. So I'm gonna ask one more question, and it's kind of broad in general. So feel free to answer it however you see fit. But if you could give one piece of advice to someone pursuing a career in law and technology, what would it be?
Just do it. If you don't try it, you won't know what it's like. Don't hesitate. It's a big leap, especially if you're an attorney or just graduated from law school. And if you want to take the leap, People Clerk will soon be hiring a product manager, and I would love someone with an attorney background. So I'll put my email in the chat, and don't hesitate to reach out.
What a great plug. I love it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, feel free to put your plugs in now too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the same, I think just building it, I think just building whatever you feel passionate about. And I don't mean necessarily coding it, but, even building a mock-up on paper, drawing it and showing it to people. And I think just talking to a lot of people, and being open about, learning from and celebrating not just wins, but also failures, and really understanding, why that happened and what people would do differently if they had to do it over again. I think will save you a lot of heartache, but there's nothing like actually building it and launching it yourself. So I agree with Camila. I think, just go for it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for both of you joining us today, Leila and Camila. It's been truly just an honor and a pleasure to speak with both of you and ask these questions. And for everyone else, we will have this recording posted on the events section of our A2J Tech website. And feel free to reach out to me. I can put my email in the chat, or to Leila and Camila, and check out the websites that they plugged. And yeah, just thank you again for everyone joining us today. And with that, we'll go ahead and end the event.
Thank you for having me. It was wonderful.
Thanks, guys.